Hello and welcome to the studio and this discussion on the employee of the future. My name is Mark Chillingworth. Gentlemen, thank you for joining today's debate. We hear a lot about the digitisation of all businesses. So can I start the discussion? Will employees of all types, in all types of organisations, be responsible for delivering at some level a digital service to customers?
Is it the responsibility of the employee or the responsibility of the business to deliver that, to enable them? Well, I guess would be my first question. But I think, to answer it another way, are we going to have to become more digitally native to serve our consumers? Yes. Are we going to have to become more digitally native to support the employees? Yes. And that's because of the growing demand and expectations from consumers and customers alike. So,
your sector, I imagine you might look at a little bit different.
Yeah, so I think in the blue collar sector, and whether that's industrials, whether that's warehousing, whether that's health and social care, with all of those, technology is a key part of all of those businesses now. It's not the same as white collar workers. It's not about email and apps on your phone, but it is about technology that underpins the way people work, to make them more productive, to help deliver experiences to customers, and to be the end deliverer. If you think about e-commerce is a digital service, but it doesn't really mean anything unless something physically arrives at your front door. That's all still done by people, but using technology.
What do you see in financial services?
Yeah, so from a banking perspective, it's a very interesting moment now, because we have moved on from discussing what is your digital strategy as a bank, or who owns that digital strategy or digital roadmap, to realizing that we need to be digital. So banking is digital, and everything around banking will have to be digital, rather than having a separate team or a single silo team working on that. So it means that if banks wants to stay relevant in the future, they need to be digitally native, and every single one within the organization, where customer face or internally focused, will have some degree of involvement in the digital strategy.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds from what you're all saying is that the relationship between the employee and technology is going to change. Are there concerns with that for you in your sectors, or?
I think we manage to serve a number of clients as they're going through this digital transformation. I mean, digital transformation can of course mean many things as well, but certainly where our involvement gets, I guess also a little like Finastra, is giving a platform that enables the digital change. Now, having said that, one of the biggest issues that you've got is you can deliver all of those tools, but adoption can become a critical issue. Mm-hmm. So, and understanding how to drive that adoption to deliver the outcome is critical. So that would be the first thing, and it'd be interesting to hear what the other guys think of that. And twinned with that is that by delivering the digitization of certain areas, introduction of AI, for example, or delivering IoT to give faster and analytics to give faster information at fingertips, you're going to be ending other roles or jobs that are potentially delivered by people today to a more AI. Now that's actually a positive role, because it means that you can start doing something perhaps more value add, but it does need a reskilling of the workforce and a change in focus to take them on that journey. So it can be quite scary on the outset, but when you look at it, it's obviously quite an exciting journey, but it is a challenge. So again, coming back to, how can we take the employees on a journey that makes sense to them, and how can we make sure when we've invested in the IT assets that they're actually being used in the way that they were intended to be?
Yeah, any technology product is mostly, I think, mostly about adoption and cultural change and transformation. It's often when we're trying to introduce new capabilities into the blue collar sector to help people plan better, we're asking people to change the way they've planned for the last 10, 15 years, and that's uncomfortable for them. Once they're through that, I was talking to one of our clients the other week, and he's a frontline manager in a warehouse. He was spending basically half a day a week doing planning. That now takes him 20, 30 minutes. Yeah. He's now got half a day back to go and spend with his staff doing pastoral care and sort of engaging with them more effectively. But it's a difficult hurdle for people to get over when you're asking them to do something they haven't done before, engage with technology in a different way. And I think there's a generational shift there. Some people will take to that in a different way to others, but that's probably the biggest barrier, not the actual core technology, I think, these days.
Some will demand it.
Yeah,
I assume.
absolutely.
If, you get new employees coming through. Why is this not on a device? Why do I need to work on a workstation? So
yeah, and there was a recent research published by Gartner that they said that more than half of the digital transformation programs fail, and then after that they said that 2/3 of the cases they fail because of people-related issues, not because it was the wrong technology or because there was not enough budget, not even the skills. It's about the mindset of the people, no? So technology is a very powerful enabler, but it's just that, an enabler. If you don't bring the people on board, if you don't change the way they think, so they also change the way they work in order to fully realize the value of that new technology, it's not going to work.
And
So it's a very pertinent question.
Yeah. And there's big demographic changes, as you said. So we're hitting 50% of the workforce being millennials now, which the way the media uses millennial may be hard to believe, but it's true. And the change of pace that drives, the way that people expect to engage with the world of work, the fact that it isn't jobs for life anymore, really does drive a different way of thinking about technology in the workplace, I think.
Is a huge part of your challenge how you communicate that, how you're changing people's lives?
I think you need to relate exactly to their life, how this is going to help them. You need to start with that question, whether it's an internal client, an employee, a colleague, or a customer. You need to design the new technology, the new systems around them, around their needs. If you are able to show that this new technology is designed to deliver value to them, to be tailor-made for them, to actually personalize the service that the technology provides them with, well, the half of the way is done already, because they will understand the value, and then the adoption, like we were talking before, will be easier. No, they will come more naturally.
Is it naive of me to believe that in the sectors that FLEC works in, that's harder than the call it for better terms, the professional sectors that you two gentlemen work in?
Not necessarily, I don't think. It's the challenges are different. People don't have a machine on their desk because they don't have a desk, and therefore the way that they need to interact with technology is different. There's a lot of stuff we are doing now that we couldn't have possibly done 5 years ago or 10 years ago, not because the technologies didn't exist, but people didn't have smartphones in their hands. They didn't have good data coverage everywhere. So we're able to do stuff because that changing nature of technology in the everyday. But I think the hunger and the desire to do things differently is as strong in blue collar as is in white collar work.
Mark, Tata does a lot of big change programs for its client base. Are you finding that the communications element of how people will interact with the enterprise technology is becoming a big part of your programs?
Well, I think the first step is, it's interesting hearing Felipe, and I totally agree, you've got to take the employee or indeed the customer on a journey. And I think that anything you do with IT has to be twinned with a business outcome. Why are you delivering IoT? Not for the sake of IoT. Why are you delivering a hybrid network? Nobody cares unless it's delivered with a view that, well, I need to be more agile. I need to move this stuff over to the cloud. Well, why do you need to move this stuff over to the cloud? Because I need to interact with my customers in a different way. In a round table we had earlier with someone, a gentleman called Paul, who worked previously at John Lewis, and I think that's a great example of where you had this big move to things to catalogue and online shopping, which was super scary for everybody that was sitting in a retail store. But look, if you didn't design to change, you wouldn't have a business anymore. And we look at the retail, the street today, high street today, it's fundamentally different. So I think you have to take the guys, the customer, and the first thing we do is try and, when we're going to a customer, is understand, well, why are you going down a path of SD-WAN, for example, or why are you trying? Let's be clear on what you're trying to achieve, so we can build something. There's so many things out there, and you tend to boil the ocean if you're not careful, and then what's the outcome of it? So delivering goals that are twinned with clear, achievable and share expectations with the CEO is important, because you can define success and show success, and ideally take the employees and the customer on a journey. And then in terms of collaboration, I mean,
Thinking of that word, collaboration, absolutely. Yeah, because it's not only that you can serve customers and colleagues better, it's that if you adopt the newer technologies, open source technology and the API-based microservices, then you can partner and collaborate not only internally but also with third parties. And that means that you can do more and you can present customers with a wider choice. And that is in banking something that is happening progressively, because banks traditionally, they are by nature conservative and risk averse, and perhaps rightly so. But we are realizing at the banking sector that that type of collaboration with the newer technologies, that only with the newer technologies is possible, well, presents banks with perfect opportunities to widen their portfolio of products and services, and therefore deliver more value to customers. So it's a big enabler in that sense as well.
So I was going to pick up on that, and the open banking sort of example is interesting, because obviously that was sort of pushed through the regulators, but I see that in the enterprise as well now, that more and more, rather than having silos and towers of technology, by being able to integrate across multiple technologies, we can provide a much more seamless service for the worker, for the employee, deliver more business value. And I think that's one of the quite exciting things, coming from my perspective, running a startup, is I don't need to build everything. I don't need to try and be another Oracle in terms of having lots of that technology. I can focus on what I'm doing, try and do that as well as we can, and then integrate into an ecosystem around us that might do payroll, or might do time and attendance, or might do something else that's allied to what we're trying to do, but we don't need to go and build that ourselves, which makes the barrier to entry for new technologies into the employee much, much lower.
Yeah, and perhaps coming back to the employee that was on the question, it allows organizations to provide them with choices. So, well, perhaps an easy example is collaboration tools. Within the Santander, as a bank, we had teams working on Teams, the Microsoft tool, another one's using Skype for business, another one uses Slack, and they had actually that choice. The technology function has become much less prescriptive. In the past, you have to do it this way, because if not, security is not going to work. And that because we were very close-minded and we didn't understand the outside world. Now this is changing, and it's providing colleagues, employees with much more choice, and then they can adapt and work with the tools and with the processes that perhaps they feel are better fit for their purpose. Yeah.
And I think when we come back to it again, to the usual, when we talked about the challenges of adoption, and also twin that with why would you deliver communications and collaboration, and I think for the latter, you have to. I mean, you look at areas like banking. There's huge security ramifications for moving things to a cloud-based infrastructure. There is a shortage of cyber professionals. You've got a workforce now starting to become more native at that, but they're not going to be everywhere. They're going to work in a different way. They're going to work in a more project-based. You have this term of the gig employee, working in bits and freelancing and moving around, but you have to therefore create a framework that delivers that collaborative and secure communications environment. But then for adoption, you've got to make it, and to your point, Felipe, you've got to make it easy for them to, if it takes them half an hour to sign in, or if it just, it's the Active Directory doesn't spin up, so there's no contacts in there, then why use it? You're just going to go back to previous technologies and try and figure out how to do it. So there is an onus to create that continuity, and it's carrot and stick. I think sometimes, we might want to shut Skype for Business because you need to move to Teams and people won't use it, but then give them an environment that's actually fun to use and works. And that's an obligation on the businesses for sure.
Yeah.
And on that point, do you think there's going to be an increase or a decrease in the adoption and the delivery of new enterprise technologies?
I mean, you mentioned a statistic before about not digitally transforming, leading. I mean, you look at there's business after business that's going out of business because they're not digitally transforming. But I think it's doing it for a purpose. Interesting IoT changing some of the implications for how, blue collar working, clean air filters, smart city kind of applications, changing how automotives, making sure that you're only going back to the garage. Why go to the garage for a simple software upgrade when it can be delivered over the air? So I think, technology's going to have to, new technologies, whether it be blockchain, IoT, big data analytics, is going to have to come in for a couple of reasons. One is the consumer demands it. They just, I take all this stuff and consume it all. Now, why shouldn't I do it from my banking, from my bank, or from my logistics company? But also they'll demand it internally. So you need to create that work that enables more remote working, that enables sort of gig employees to do their thing, that gives them a secure environment. So I think it's coming two ways. I don't think it's a choice; you have to do it. But I don't think it's necessarily a technology specific thing, because it has to be built around what you're looking to achieve as well.
But this modern technology and how easy is then to integrate, even if there are solutions from different third parties, is what is creating is more and more very granular propositions and granular companies that are very specialized on one specific function, or sometimes even one specific step in a process. And that is now possible because their technology, API-based and cloud-based software as a service, allows for that. So one recent example in Santander is the new onboarding for SME lending, for instance. In the past, this was very much paper-based, and perhaps we call a couple of partners like Experian for the incredible history and someone else from customer due diligence. Now we might be calling 30 to 35 different fintechs or third parties to do the digital signature, to validate the document, to access the company's house.
From anywhere in the world.
Anywhere, even government organizations, HMRC does have an API that you can pull out the VAT returns quarterly so that you can analyze the business figures and how they are doing. And then there's a fintech that allows you to, once you pass the financial statements, allows you the forecast and compare with the competition. So there's so much to do because of the technology. So to your question,
it enables it.
There are going to be more and more because there is a more granular and a specialization in that.
And I think we'll start seeing a huge amount of that going into the non-traditional, more blue collar, more industrial spaces where it's kind of been forgotten about a lot of the time. A lot of stuff that in the professional services world has been there for a very long time. That's starting to go into blue collar. Actually, what's interesting is it's then being able to almost skip a generation of technology and go straight to stuff that's really, really good and really usable, rather than kind of going through that painful, not very user experience designed, focused capability. But I think we are seeing huge amount of technology going into the world of employee-facing technology, be that supporting, workers in warehouses, supporting financial services, whatever it is. There's a lot of new technologies going in.
Quick last question is: do you think technology implementations are going to become more successful or less successful?
Touch wood.
Well, I guess as someone that delivers it, there's no doubt that yes, of course. No, I think without doubt we're far better at delivering agile networks than we were 4 or 5 years ago. I think the technology is better understood. What you're trying to achieve is better understood. And I actually think there's more receptiveness to it from the CEOs. Before, IT was divorced completely from, I don't need to know about what's going on over here. Now, you're explaining it in a business way. So I think yes. However, of course, that's the status quo. But technology is changing at such a pace, and new entrants are coming in from everywhere, which is an opportunity and a threat. So yes, I think we're better at doing from our perspective. We definitely see that we're better, and it's getting more replicable, and it's getting more delivery, and it's getting more projects on time, etc. But for sure, what's around the corner?
That's it.
And it's as Felipe said, that because things are smaller now, we're seeing lots and lots of small deliveries, which I think by and large, from my experience, are more successful. We're seeing thankfully, far fewer big, heavy rollouts of a 3-year project that just appears on everybody's desktop with no real purpose often. So that changing nature of delivery, the changing nature of software being delivered, the fact that companies can do a lot of this themselves now. They are starting to develop technologies themselves. I know Santander does a lot of that, as well as working with partners. So the whole nature of the way that we deliver technology changes. It's then kind of harder to say, well, is that more or less successful, because you've got far more projects.
Yeah.
More of them are designed to fail early, to learn stuff and experiment.
And technology.
And then, but that's not the same as spending 10 years building an ERP system for it to fall over on day one, and it falls flat. It's a different.
Actually, technology helps on that, because newer technologies can provide you with better monitoring, proactive maintenance. So you are constantly monitoring your systems, your applications for any sign of potential failure in the future, and you can act on that. There's a tricky bit on the question though, because as there is so much technology in place and there is so many things interconnected, the scary thing is that there could be that weak spot.
How do you maintain
that? If it fails, perhaps the impact is such a big, on a bigger scale. Now, if in the banking sector now the regulator is very worried about, okay, everyone is moving to Amazon Web Services or Microsoft Azure. What if it fails? Or are you telling me that it's impossible that they fail? So it creates that single point of failure that if it fails, even if it's a very robust place, the consequences could be far bigger than in the past. But in general, the newer technology is more proven, more resilient, and it provides you with more mechanisms to see it, so that you can monitor it, so that you can act on it.
And I think just one other thing that I guess we've got spent more and more time, which was a byproduct. It wasn't really about delivering a project per se, but is just the kind of regulatory changes that you see in the markets now, certainly in things like IoT or GDPR. This is something that wouldn't necessarily be an IT requirement, but now you're having to deliver. But again, the technology and the agility within, well, okay, you need to maybe store and compute and mine data near a source or in a certain geography. Well, that can be done with a cloud-based infrastructure. So, again, the technology gives you more choice. But that's not to say that things can come up that are going to consume quite a lot of management thought and time to get through.
And as Alex was saying earlier, it's interesting how the regulators are actually pushing it, aren't they, with open banking and open water and various other areas coming in. We could list every vertical market.
Yes,
They're all going to be open.
And Brexit, I hate to bring it up, but
So do I.
Now, there is a flip side. It's probably a curious one in the banking industry. So we still run more than half of our systems, traditional banks, not new ones, are still running systems that were written, 30 years ago in COBOL, in the mainframe technologies and so on. And this is no longer attractive for the new workforce. So it's meaning that the skills to maintain all those systems are very...
That's starting to diminish, I imagine, as well.
And then that creates a risk. So that transition where not everything is just modern technology, there is still all technology that runs and supports very critical functions, in this case, banking industry, the coexistence of them can be tricky.
So to change is risky, to not change is risky.
Yeah, and I think actually with things like cloud as well, we see this, in network, it was, everything was managed. Then 2 years later, it was 5-10 years later, it's actually I'm going to self-serve. Then it's like actually I can't do that, so it spins back to kind of a hybrid version. And the same with cloud. I mean, there is a big, massive push to Microsoft and AWS, they're fantastic platforms. But I think also in certain financial services sectors, others where they've got highly sensitive data and there's critical risk, you'll see some sort of hybrid cloud coming back and taking more of the floor as well.
The latest, the big deal from the Pentagon that they chose Microsoft Azure, which is better in a hybrid private cloud environment, probably proves the point.
Yes.
They didn't choose Amazon even if they have a bigger resilience or perhaps a bigger capacity. Yeah, you are absolutely right.
Felipe, Alex and Mark, thank you for sharing your views, fantastic insights into what's happening in your various sectors and how the relationship between people, employees, whatever their level, is changing with technology. This has been a really interesting debate. I really appreciate your efforts. Thank you. This is The Studio. Thank you for watching. My name is Mark Chillingworth.